Hey guys, Ted Bogert with the Ted Show. We're back. We have one of my favorite people, Sheriff Dennis Lemma, is with us from Seminole County Sheriff's Department. Welcome, Sheriff Lemma. Thank you so much for taking time out to have this awesome conversation we're going to have about reform, mental health awareness, and initiatives, and things like that. So, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me on your show again, Ted. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. It's always great to have a conversation with our officials, and of course, with everything that's gone on, and especially in the past several months, a discussion on reform and what's going on and where the sheriff's department's thinking. And it's good, I think, for the general population, the ones who are reading about things and they aren't sure if they need to worry, not worry. It's good to hear it from the top guys. So. Give us a little background on you before we get into that. I don't know if you were born and decided you wanted to be a sheriff back then, but tell us a little bit about your origin story.
Well, my kind of background here is people ask me, when did you know that you wanted to serve your country or community? And I tell them half jokingly that as soon as I was old enough to know that superheroes did not exist, I knew that I wanted to get as close to that feeling as I possibly could. I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, was honorably discharged from the Marine Corps, used the GI Bill to earn an undergraduate degree in criminal justice and then a master's degree in administrative leadership. And I'm a 28-year veteran of the Seminole County Sheriff's Office. Essentially have worked here most of my adult life and ascended the ranks. Started as a correctional officer, worked as a deputy, an investigator, a sergeant, a lieutenant, a captain, a major. And before becoming the 10th sheriff in Seminole County's history, I was the chief deputy, which was the chief operating officer of the Seminole County Sheriff's Office. So I am honored to serve my country and community and delighted to be here.
We're thankful for your service, for sure. I know I am. All right, so let's talk about what's been going on. Obviously, on everybody's mind, it's talk about reform. And so we've had lots of guests on where we talk about what that actually looks like. And I'll kind of give you a couple of things that people ask prior to going live, and then we can have a conversation about it. I think that when people hear things like defund the police, they get worried. And I know I'm one of them. I don't like that word. I'm not a fan of that terminology. I think that there's a better way to phrase that. But there's obviously a need for some sort of reform. There's got to be a call for some sort of reform. So if you could kind of explain what that looks like for you and maybe give us your input on what the reality is behind defund the police. I think people get scared, Sheriff Lemma, because they're like, gosh, are we not going to have any police department left?
Yeah.
And not that there aren't people that want that. But this discussion is about the primary group of people who just want to see some reform. They don't want to see the police officers go away.
Yeah. So, I do think that there is reason to be concerned if there's any momentum that is being generated with defunding the police narrative. I generally think that there's two groups of large, broad individuals that are behind this whole defund the police. One is a total extremist group. They want complete anarchy, and it results in total loss of control and significant increases in crime rates and just a free-for-all. And I think that we've seen that in some areas of the country here recently, Seattle just being one of them. I think that is extremely dangerous and a little bit ridiculous, quite frankly.
Well, I agree. And before you get to the second one, I want to make a point. That's such a great point. People see every single day what's going on in Portland. And I'm amazed that they think that is what they equate that with defund the police.
Yeah.
And nobody I've ever spoken to wants that.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that except the extremists, I think, that you're talking about.
Yeah. There's a small group of people, actually, Ted, that do want that. They would like to have no police whatsoever. And again, I think that that's such a small minority. It's not even worth really talking about that because they won't win. I mean, they won't generate that. I think that there's another group though that is behind defunding the police, and I don't know that they're really behind defunding. I think that they're really, if you talk to them, they're talking about reallocation of funds that are going towards social services and social work. And what's interesting is when they actually find out what the police departments and sheriff's offices are actually doing, more often than not, they say, "Oh, I didn't know you were already doing that." I stand corrected. I did not know that you were investing on early adolescent programs. I did not know that you were partnering with the UNCF and the NAACP. I didn't know that you were running in some cases, complete social service organizations. So I think that when you look at, especially our law enforcement community here in Central Florida, we are running a full, nonstop, holistic criminal justice organization. And I think that when people get tied up on the word policing, it is the most sensational aspect of what law enforcement officers do, and that's apprehending the offenders. But I tell you, there's a whole lot more that goes on behind the scenes, and that is not played out through mainstream media that wins favor with these groups that may be on the fence about where the funding should go.
Well, the sensationalism is what mainstream media, I love all my mainstream media friends, but there's some sensationalism, which is why it's so difficult for people to really maneuver through all of the minutia of the stuff that they get thrown at them from mainstream media because of the sensationalized part. If you talk to most people who will say, mention the first thing is defund the police, and then you talk about the social programs that you all participate in and basically run and engage. And then you also talk about, well, they're really focusing on in their opinion, the police officers who have taken the law into their own hands or provided some sort of challenge to the way things are supposed to be. And
well,
so go ahead.
Yeah. There's 800,000 law enforcement officers, just like any other occupation that is widely recognized and known. You're going to have some bad actors that need to be held accountable within their agencies, and quite frankly, to the fullest extent of the law. And that's why, I'm very pleased to see that people that break the law, and particularly this George Floyd murder situation, that are held accountable in the criminal justice system.
Right.
But we have to make sure that with that haste that other people who are doing what is reasonable and necessary. We've always judged the right and wrong of law enforcement officers on what a reasonably prudent individual would do faced with similar circumstances. And I think that it's very important for us as leaders not to lose focus of that. Now, there's a few things that do need to be reformed, in my opinion. Organizations that help support bad cops need to have less teeth and less strength. If we know that somebody has been accused of committing a violation 15 times, which I think the number was around 15 in the situation with George Floyd, well, in our business, they call that a clue. That person should not have a license to practice and operate, and more swift actions need to be taken to make sure that they never carry a gun or carry a badge again. Those individuals should not represent the 800,000 good, honest, hardworking, law-abiding professional law enforcement officers that we find make up the overwhelming majority of our occupation.
I couldn't agree more. As somebody on the outside looking in, who's blessed enough to know great leaders like you, Sheriff Gibson, Sheriff Mina, it's so amazing to me that the couple people, the few, I know there's more than a few, but statistically there's fewer people who are just making it such a challenge. And the people who are out there, I know they'll say, well, a lot of them don't get caught because people don't report them. They're absolutely right. But I think that we're on the right path to changing that, to reforming that, to really making that so there isn't an opportunity for somebody to have 5, 6, 7 plus of the same types of complaints and violations over and over again. And I think that is where so much of the anger comes in, is when you read these stories, a lot of it is repeat offenders.
And you know what else, Ted? The other side of that too is there's no doubt about it that working in law enforcement is an incredibly stressful job. And we need to make sure that we're providing support and services to our members where they know that there's individuals internally and externally that they can reach out to and talk to if they're experiencing stress and all of these things that may translate into their actions or behavior while serving the public. So it's not only holding those bad actors accountable, but protecting those people that we have that may need help and services for, whatever stressors that they may be faced with.
As things have progressed, it feels like we still have great momentum in this. So what are your ongoing discussions like? Like, what are you seeing some things? Do you have some plans to make some changes? What are you going to do in Seminole County as far as reform goes?
Well, what's great, and this is largely not only here in Seminole County, but most of the Central Florida area, if not all of the Central Florida area, those recommendations for reform, those things don't even apply to our local law enforcement here. Many of those things, like the unannounced knocks, and these things really are things that have not gone on here for decades. In Seminole County, we do not employ the chokehold as a technique unless all other avenues have failed and there's imminent and constant deadly threat of force against a law enforcement officer. A scenario that I give somebody is, if a law enforcement officer is laying on their back getting stabbed with a knife, well, all rules are out the window at that point in time. But I think that you'll find, looking at our policies, you'll have most agencies here that have the most modernized and sophisticated policies that govern against misuse and ultimately leading to mistrust of law enforcement. But I think that when we look at our history, we have to realize that it wasn't so long ago where you had active law enforcement officers that were racist. You talk about and study the civil rights, and here and especially the Deep South and the state of Florida. I think that we saw that play out over the past few years with former Sheriff Willis McCall over in Lake County and the Groveland Four, and Gilbert King's book Devil in the Grove, and Governor Ron DeSantis offering the pardon for the Groveland Four guys. But if you think about it, in the history of our country, 60, 70 years ago is really not that long ago. And I think that we do have to constantly engage in conversation and hope that conversation leads to relationships that are built on trust, where you can talk about not only right and wrong and fact and fiction, but you can actually find out how certain segments of our community actually feel about the decisions. And when you can do that, you've accomplished something great. Even here in Seminole County, we had the results, many years ago now, with the death of Trayvon Martin and the trial of George Zimmerman. And at the conclusion of those trials, I had many active leaders in the African American community come up to me and say, "Look, Dennis, I understand that a jury of his peers has made a decision, but that decision has made me feel this way." And I think if you can talk about feelings, you've made progress.
That is such a good point. Great segue, because one of the number one question I got prior to going live was, if something happens, people are afraid, like say something happens, I'm not talking about a chokehold, but anything where they feel like perhaps there's an issue. The fear of repercussion was the number one thing that stopped them from saying something. And this is overall law enforcement, not Seminole County. What is the process? What's the best way for someone who feels like they were potentially a victim of whatever to reach out to the right people at the sheriff's department?
Yeah. So the easiest way is, call and make a report. I think that if it's a routine report, it's something that you just want to talk to somebody's supervisor. It's not unlike any other form of customer service, where if you feel like you're dissatisfied, you ask for whoever the supervisor is. But on those more severe cases, or in the cases where there's fear of repercussions and all of those things, each law enforcement agency has what is titled a professional standards or a professional review or an internal affairs section. Their purpose is to offer investigative ability on any violations of policy or written directive or state statute. You can also reach out to members of the executive command staff. I know that we don't receive too many complaint calls here at the office, but I can tell you that complaints and comments are something that any CEO of a law enforcement agency would take extremely seriously. I'm proud to say here that one of the checks and balances we have, back to your question about reform, we really didn't have to do much of it because for 25 years or so we've had a citizen advisory board and a citizen review board here at the sheriff's office that is represented by a diverse of civilian members from the outside, and they're a great sounding board to make sure that we don't lose touch of reality of how people actually feel. Right. They see something may happen on the other side of the country on television. There is real fear associated with that. And we want to make sure that people feel comfortable with stepping out and making their voice heard. That's why transparency is a big part of this. Body cameras and in-car dash cameras. And I'm extremely grateful that almost every person who carries a cell phone carries a camera with them as well.
I agree. I think the fact that we have all of that, where the transparency, I mean, it's there. People can see it. You can film. It's not what you set out to do, but it's good to have it to protect against those things. And I love that you're a proponent of that. I have to ask, you guys have done, just to shift a little, you all have really pumped up the advocacy on mental health and substance abuse. So talk about the initiative and the advocacy that you all are doing at the Seminole County Sheriff's Department.
So you have a kind of a couple school of thoughts when it comes to policing and what you're doing, but I will tell you that we here at the Seminole County Sheriff's Office believe that crime is a symptom of another problem, and if we want to make our community safer, we will address those underlying conditions that are present that lead people down that path in the first place. And I think that substance abuse and mental health and poor parenting are all at the top of the list. Not only does it reduce the level of recidivism, but it also saves lives in many cases. And this is why, the governor implemented, some of the recommendations that we made. I chaired a working group for opioid use disorder for Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody, and I was nominated as the vice chair of that force. And then appointed by the First Lady to be the chair of her drug abuse prevention panel. But it wasn't because of anything that I offered, but it was rather the model that we have created here in Seminole County that is helping people navigate a path towards recovery, while at the same time holding those drug dealers fully accountable to the fullest extent of the law, particularly the ones that are dealing deadly doses of fentanyl. We've charged nearly 18 people with first-degree murder here in Seminole County when they've dealt deadly doses of that drug.
So tell us, give us just a little quick outline of what that looks like. So you're doing things in a way that obviously is creative and got the attention of the governor's office. What is it about what you do specifically with your officers and your staff that are trained? What's different about what you do that is really spearheading this whole initiative and movement in the advocacy?
Yeah, so the number one predictor of whether or not somebody will overdose and die is whether or not they've overdosed and lived. And up until this point, a lot of people who were really overdosing, being hospitalized at a local receiving facility, and then being released back into the exact same environment that they overdosed in the first place, increasing their likelihood of overdosing and dying by more than 800% in the first 12 months. So what we did was we partnered with public and private organizations. Walmart believed in our program so much that they came and personally delivered a $500,000 check to me specifically for our programs. And they said, we'll be back next year to give you another $250,000 to help sustain this.
It's amazing.
And then the CEO of Advent Health, Tim Cook, partnered with us on a Hope and Healing Center. And this is a center that's located directly across from our correctional facility. That will be a state-of-the-art medical facility that will open in the next couple of months, where people who are navigating a course to recovery, whether they're a member of the VA, looking for VA benefits, whether they're the uninsured or underinsured population, we have to make sure that medical-based or medical-assisted treatment gets into the hands of the people who are opioid dependent the most. Before this COVID-19, I want you to recall, Ted, that we had 19 people a day dying in the state of Florida to an opioid-related overdose.
Wow.
More than 80% of those people, were introduced to the drug by Big Pharma, or particularly Purdue Pharmaceutical, because they were convinced that it was not harmful for their health. And when we closed those pill mills down, there are already tens of thousands of people who are opioid dependent and no longer able to get their drugs. So as we come out of this pandemic, my hypothesis is there's going to be a greater need for mental health services. There's going to be a greater need for all types of substance abuse. Think about the amount of children or victims of domestic violence that have gone unreported because they were sheltering in place. So if we're not prepared as a society, and the governor was just in town just a couple of days ago, we had a roundtable talking about this. If we're not prepared to pick up the pieces and offer those services, we're going to have a big problem on our hands, maybe even possibly bigger than the negative effects of COVID-19 itself.
I just think it's amazing that you have isolated it out. I mean, you all are looking at the problem rather than a one size fits all. This is the consequence. I think that's so important because there are people. My master's degree is in health services, and so I worked in. Used to be called HRS, but now it's called something else. I worked in that field for a long time, and I was always amazed that the recidivism rate was so high going back into those facilities because we weren't providing them enough of the tools to be able to handle it once they got back out. And then, or we were putting people in jail who really needed the mental health services or the detox or the treatment, and they were being put in the general population. This is back in the day, and it just never served a great purpose except to expand the jails and then to expand the people who were not getting the services that they really needed. So it was a terrible, terrible vicious cycle, and I love to see proactive, positive, creative things to try to help that population, because guys, if you don't know it, you might hear it about it, but it's crazier than you think it is. It's really crazy.
Yeah, we've seen this where people who have not been involved in the criminal justice system at all are going down the path, and they now became addicted to this very, very powerful substance. And what I've told people is this is not a situation of trying to make bad people good, but rather sick people well, while at the same time the drug dealers need to be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. To reflect on the programs that we have internally, it's just not medical assisted treatment, but it's cognitive behavioral therapy. It's partnering with all of these other groups. But we had at least 3 inmates in our correctional facility petition the judge to extend their sentences longer, in some cases up 3 months longer, because for the first time in many years they were getting clean. Although that is a wonderful reflection of the services that we're offering internally, it tells me that there's a void in services externally. And what we plan to do here in Seminole County is work with our state representatives, lawmakers, governor, and first lady to look at what I feel is a broken Baker Act system. When people are being involuntarily taken for their own mental health, sometimes 4, 5, 6 times per month, well, there's something wrong with that. They call that a clue in this business. We need to do something more with that. And we need to make sure that more people have accessibility to assisted outpatient treatment. We lost 2 law enforcement officers here in Seminole County at the hands of somebody who was a paranoid schizophrenic person. It is very dangerous for law enforcement officers to deal with people who are not properly medicated and treated for their mental illness.
Challenge. All right, so I have to ask you, you're running for re-election. It's a crazy world out there. What's your why? Why do you want to continue?
Yeah, so I'm passionate about what we do. I'm passionate about the men and women who I have the opportunity to work with, and I'm blessed to sit in this seat today. But this seat never belonged to me. It belongs to the voters of Seminole County. If they believe in our philosophy and what we're doing, and I would argue that let the numbers speak for themselves. In the 107-year history of Seminole County, there's never been a crime rate lower than there is today. And even over the past 3 years, there's been a 23% reduction in crime. That allows us to focus on all of these underlying conditions that are present that lead us down the path in the first place. It's why, Ted, quite honestly, almost everyone has endorsed us, from the Attorney General to the prosecutor from the 18th Judicial Circuit, the public defender, all our county commissioners, all of our mayors, all of our police chiefs, the Fraternal Order of Police, the realtors, I mean, it is such a humbling expression to get that much support, but not for me, Ted, but for the men and women of this agency that work hard day in and day out to preserve our great quality of life here in Seminole County. The most significant thing that we can do is to prevent front crime from occurring in the first place. And when I decide to leave, I'm hopeful that somebody can take on the work that we've done and carried on, but it's just not now. We're not finished here yet.
One of the many reasons why I love having you on the show is you're not afraid to show your heart, and I think that's so critical, especially when you think about, you think of police strong, and you are strong, but you have a heart and you're transparent, and people can see that and feel it. And you obviously have a heart for social services and really doing the right thing by the citizens that are in your county. So thank you for that. And thank you for coming on the show. The best way for people to reach out, maybe find out more, is to go to SeminoleSheriff.org.
SeminoleSheriff.org, or you can follow us on any one of the social media platforms. Just a quick search in the search link will lead you to us. And I encourage you to do that, because we put some of the most remarkable stories that you could ever imagine on there. And we love our media partners and have a great relationship with them, but sometimes they don't have the time to air them all out. Take a look at what the heroes are doing within the agency, and I think that a little generosity for our brothers and sisters in blue and the citizens that we protect goes a long way. And I think that that's a great way to see what's going on and what's happening.
Agreed. Thank you so much, Sheriff Lemma, for being on the show. It's a joy, you guys. SeminoleSheriff.org, or you can go to social media, which I tagged already. Reach out. There's so much great information on their site and on their social media. And just the way Sheriff Lemma is on this show is exactly the way he is in person, with a heart of gold. I appreciate you, Sheriff Lemma, so much.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you for having me on.
Have a great one, you guys.
You too.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.